Well, my name is Matt Jansen, and I'm going to be giving the update for February here. I thought I'd put a little bit of a flair on there since today is Fat Tuesday for Mardi Gras for those that are keeping track or not keeping track. So just a little bit of a theme today for you. Let's see, get my slides to advance here. So the first thing I wanted to talk about is venting for POWTS. Is that there's always been some questions about, where do we vent? How do we vent? What do we need to do? And I'm not going to get too much into discussion. I know that there has been some with the research done by the university on, concrete degradation and vents and what it does to the concrete tanks by allowing more oxygen in. That's a whole separate discussion. Maybe we'll do that another time. I know they have some thoughts and ideas on how to prevent that air exchange in there. But requirements for POWTS venting, all septic tanks need to be vented. And that's if you look at SPS 384.25 parent 5 parent A, that's where it comes from. So it simply states that each tank, except for camping unit transfer containers, shall be provided with a means of venting gases formed inside the tank to the atmosphere. So I know previously we had, other venting. You remember that we used to have vents on the end of each of our drain field runs, especially on large systems like a school or a church or something like that. You'd see all the cast iron goosenecks, out there in the drain field. But this is the language where it states what we need for venting, and it says that the tank has to be vented. So how can this be done? Well, there's a couple different ones, whether it's gravity or pumped. First one we could take a look at is, venting the tank itself. We have to vent a tank. If you put a vent on the tank, that would be the way to accomplish it. So just like in this photo here, a lot of people will just have a vent, incorporated into the manhole cover. Others, may have a separate vent that goes down into the lid. But you can vent there, vent the septic tank or vent the tank that way. Another way that can be done is you can vent out in the drain field. Again, this does have, a venting effect out there. It's only used really with the gravity. Obviously, you can't vent a drain field if you're having a pumped or dosed system. If you have a pump running and you vent it, if you connect it through that piping, you're going to have a fountain out there. So the only valid way would be, venting a drain field would be, sort of a gravity, conventional drain field. And that way the air could come back into the tank. The third option for you would be to vent through the house stack. So the issue with, you can do this one so that the septic tank would drain or vent back through the sewer line, the building sewer, and then also through the building drain, and then up through the house vent. So this way is, advantageous because, any venting gas or whatever would go up and above the building, get carried away, as opposed to, I know we have sometimes some odors, from a septic tank out in the backyard or something like that. There is a catch though with this one. So everybody says, well, geez, why don't we just do it this way? Because this would make the most sense and easiest. We don't have to have extra vents, other things out there. And we'll look at that in a minute. So these would be basically your three ways. You can vent the tank. That's the most common one that we have. It's also the most direct, especially if you have a pump chamber and you need to have, that air exchange as the pump's drawing down or whatever. That's where it makes the most sense, is to have venting, is to put it right out there at the tank and allow that air exchange to take place. But the catch is that I mentioned, if we do vent back through the building stack, there is a problem with that one though. Is under SPS 382.3117B3A, that's a long one. The portion of the building drain or building subdrain connected and the vent shall be at least one pipe size larger than the minimum size permitted. So the problem that we have there is that if we have a 4-inch building sewer and building drain, we're going to have to go up to a 6-inch. So that's the next size up. They'll make a 5-inch pipe. So we'd have to go to a 6-inch. So that would be the problem, is that you could vent back to the building sewer and building drain, but we would have to go up to a 6-inch to do it. So really, it's not a practical solution. I don't know many people that would be willing to change the plumbing inside the building and do a building sewer up to a 6-inch, but technically you could. So, basically the three avenues that we have again would be, you can either, if you're gravity, you can vent at the tank, vent in the drain field, or vent through the house. If you're going up that size. Otherwise, if it's a pump system, vent at the tank or vent at the house, but then again, you got to go up that size. So those would be the options. Just sort of want to clarify some of the venting. We've had some questions on that about, how, where, and why do we have to vent. So the other thing to pay attention to is that, that's just sort of for the traditional, I guess, how do we say it? DSPS component manuals or types of systems. But there are other venting requirements. For instance, here, you have to look at the products that are being used. So an Elgin gravity component manual has very specific requirements. And this is just one of them. There's a second one that gets into combination vent observation pipes. So they have also specific things that have to be done. Connect to a gravity flow distribution lateral by use of the fitting. Has to be a nominal size of 4 inches, have to extend at least 12 inches above finished grade, has to terminate in a manner that allows free air between distribution lateral and atmosphere. The vent opening port is downward, and it's required for systems with greater than 18 inches of cover. So Elgin does have specific venting requirements inside of their component manual. So that's just something else to be aware of, is that depending on, not only, what type of system it is, but if you're using particular products, they may have very specific venting requirements also. Wanted to mention DSPS.
Matt, this is Katie. See, there was a question in the chat regarding the rationale of the 6-inch venting through the house stack. The question was, what's the rationale on the 6-inch venting through the house stack? Why does it need to be sized larger?
The reason for the larger sizing on that is that basically they're determining that the flow from out of the building is encompassing a certain percentage volume of the pipe. And that if we're going to use venting then from the septic tank or whatever, if you're running a pump or something like that, and we need to have a larger pipe size in order to accommodate that venting going all the way back through the building, because that vent or the size of the pipe is only sized for the flow of the wastewater and for the vent for the fixtures that are already inside the building. So we would have to go up to a 6-inch size to accommodate that additional use of that pipe, of using it as venting of the septic system. So that's why it requires bumping up in size. That I've never seen it used. It's just, it is an option, but I've never seen it used as an option, just because of the cost involved in upsizing.
There was another question in the chat regarding pumps and venting. So how come in years past only a pump chamber had to be vented? Is the question.
Right. Well, we have to have a vent someplace. So if we have a free flowing air in from the septic tank into the pump chamber, then the air is going to be able to exchange through there, but we do have to have a vent someplace. And that's basically what the requirement is we have to vent that system someplace, or vent that tank someplace. So whatever method or whatever place we decide to put it, the best choice is for a pump chamber is actually to vent at the pump chamber itself. All right, if no other questions, we'll move on to the next part. The SPS license databases. So I wanted to mention those. We had a little discussion here ahead of time. Katie and I were talking about licenses. They are coming up for renewal now, and so it's important to sort of know where your licenses are, where to find them. If your license is coming up for renewal, make sure that you stay on it. keep your license renewed, check not only your license, but other people that you work with. If you're in a shop and you have workers, journeymen, or learners underneath you, make sure their licenses are up to date, including your own. So we do have the database for the CST soil tester. That's in ISLA. So we had talked about the transition many years ago. The CST license was sort of the guinea pig that was sent over to the ISLA database. And then it created, a lot of confusion because we have our customer number, which is our old license number. And then they had that extra SP, which is basically just sort of a license number generated by the ISLA system, but it's really not your credential. But anyway, for those that had the CST and have other licenses, it's been sort of a pain because you have to look in the ISLA system to get your CST license, where all the other licenses, the regular trade licenses, the plumbers, the inspector, and the maintainer's license are still in your old trades license database. So, we know it's been problematic having the two. And we said for years, it'll all be better someday that all of our trades licenses will be now in the ISLA system and we'll all be one big happy family. We won't have to go back and forth to try to find our two licenses. Well, last month we were notified that there's a new system for everyone. We're actually going to License E. So License E is the system that handles all the professional licenses, so they handle all the databases, everything from like engineers and architects to nursing, to auctioneers and real estate, licenses. So the good news is that we are finally, well, hopefully merging all into one system. But it's not ISA like we thought. We're all going to License E, the new database. So as I mentioned, majority of professional licenses are on the new licensee. This was done from, prior the old Department of Reg and Licensing licenses we had before we merged as an agency, before Commerce merged with them into the new Department of Safety Professional Services. So those licenses are already in the licensee system. Trades credentials are being transferred over starting, what we were informed was starting January 8th. I haven't heard an update. I don't know when those trade licenses are being transferred over. So the word here is that we know that licenses are coming due and that this transfer is going to the licensee system. So there's been some mixed results on setting up accounts in licensee and getting that going. There is YouTube videos on our, there is a DSPS channel, YouTube channel, and you could go on there and check out some YouTube videos on how to set up an account or access that licensee database. As we get more information, we're going to let you know what we know as soon as more becomes available. But the key here is that because licenses are renewing and turning over, it's probably your best interest to go into the current database and get your license renewed now instead of getting caught up in this transfer and then having to try to renew a license and licensee. And if you're having problems getting your account set up, we don't want to have your license expire or have some issues with that. So, and I believe Katie, you said when we do the follow-up here for POWTS Chat today, you were going to send out an email link to that database.
Correct. So I will try to do my follow-up email to this POWTS Chat sooner than later. I know some months it's like a day, 2 days after, but I'll try to get it done by this afternoon. And I'll include the link to the website that people can use to renew their trades credentials. So it was mentioned in the chat, when do renewals open? It's my understanding that 60 days in advance of your expiration date is when your license would be eligible for renewal. So for folks like soil testers and POWTS inspectors whose renewal is at the end of June, you don't need to worry about this transition of systems right now. But for folks like POWTS maintainers and plumbers whose renewals are either mid-March or the end of March, I would really highly recommend that you follow the link that I will send in that email and renew your credential as soon as possible. The website that's currently being used is very easy. You just enter in your credential number and give the state money. the transition to licensee is new. So I guess I would just recommend do it ASAP with the old system so that you don't have to learn a new system for 4 more years if you don't want to. Thanks.
Right, and it's not only that, but also so all the kinks can be worked out. You know, if there is any kind of issue, again, we don't want, or you rather don't want to be caught up with trying to get your license renewed and have to work out kinks where, whatever some reason you can't set up an account or it's not taking it or whatever is happening. You know, just like any new system, there's always some hiccups and some issues. So I guess it would make sense to get your license renewed, you know, in the current way that works flawlessly, as opposed to dealing with any kind of hiccups in a new system. The next want to mention some product approvals. I know we mentioned this at the last POWTS chat a little bit, and we've talked about it more at some of our updates and at the WOWRA convention. But you know, as of spring 2023, POWTS product approvals are reviewed internally in the POWTS program. So this includes new and renewal products, such as, you know, tanks, treatment devices, component manuals. So, you know, any product used in the state of Wisconsin, you know, requires a product approval. So, you know, what we're looking at is, you know, bringing these things in. It's going to be, you know, an internal review now in the program. You know, not that we were, you know, that the, you know, folks in Madison doing product approvals were doing it, you know, poorly or anything, but, you know, they were tasked with multiple different programs at handling the product. So sort of a jack of all trades kind of thing is the way we'd put it. So, you know, internal review, you know, benefits the industry. Well, hopefully we'll have quicker turnarounds because we're going to have POWTS people working on POWTS products. It will also have specialized product knowledge. You know, we know what the products should or shouldn't do, know the terminology better by working with it. And then hopefully we'll have more uniform requirements and standardization across not only product categories, you know, so that, you know, one septic tank, you know, concrete precast guy gets treated the same way as the next concrete precast manufacturer would, but also within a manufacturer that we make sure when products come in that, you know, because we're more intimately involved with those products, that we make sure that, you know, a manufacturer, for instance, again, precast, you know, that he has 10 different tanks, that all those tanks are going to have the same standards applied, the same requirements, and we don't, you know, as products have come through, we've sort of missed some things that, you know, this one requires a depth of bury, but that one doesn't, or this one requires a certain thing and that one doesn't. So we just want to make sure that we're more uniform across those product categories and then also within the manufacturer. So some of the goals that we also want to do is want to simplify product categories, change things like if everybody's trying to look for a filter, for instance, it's a sewage treatment apparatus, not very intuitive to know that's what I have to call it to find filter. So, you know, we want to clarify some of our product categories, make things, you know, more readily searchable and easier to identify. You know, multiple products by manufacturer listed together with the same expiration date. Again, if you have a precast with 10 different tanks, we don't want 10 tanks expiring at all different times and then trying to figure out if this tank is, you know, a valid product today or not. So, you know, basically, you know, sort of clean up some of those kind of things, make it easier to manage. Also, products in each category will again have similar metrics applied. So, you know, if we're looking at one precast concrete, we're going to make sure that they have the same requirements or same I guess levels of review that we would have with somebody else, that we look at the same things and we're not treating different products differently. So those are some of the things that we hope to clean up with our internal review. One of the other things that you know, again, we had mentioned is, you know, wastewater treatment devices, you know, for the pre-treatment devices, the product approvals, you know, have different conditions and capabilities. You know, not all products are the same. And sometimes even within a manufacturer, you know, you may have different, you know, products that have different capabilities. Some of the units receive vertical separation credit, but they require what we call tertiary treatment. So you've got your septic tank as your primary treatment, and then a secondary treatment would be like a pre-treatment device, like an aerobic treatment unit. But a tertiary treatment would be something such as UV or chlorination. So some units receiving that vertical separation, actually their data from the manufacturer says they need to have a tertiary treatment to get vertical separation or reduce the pathogens of the fecal coliforms. Some units were NSF, that's the National Sanitation Foundation approved, using a certain setup that was not indicated on the approval letter. That's, the way they achieved NSF certification was by doing certain things, a certain setup, maybe multiple tanks, or maybe they did have tertiary treatment. So based on that process, because they received NSF certification doesn't mean the unit itself did it. It was the process or how they were set up. And so, we need to take a look at those to make sure that, those that require tertiary treatment are including it. Those that had a certain setup are following that setup to meet their standards and not just putting the unit out there by itself. So basically what this boils down to is that we did reach out to the manufacturers for a resolution of discrepancies in their product approvals. So we send out a request for information to clarify, what is needed or how their product needs to be set up and how we're approving it. And then they have until March 29th to respond. So once they get back to us, then we're going to, decide or with them decide what action we need to do, whether we need to, modify their product approval or whether they're good to go based on the data that they supplied. So it's up in the air yet about what's, where we're going to go with it. So, moving forward, what do we do or what do you do? So for right now, it's status quo, but you have to follow the product approval. Some product approvals for some manufacturers actually state in order to get fecal coliform reduction below 10 to the fourth or below 10,000, they need to have a tertiary treatment. They need to have a UV or chlorination. Unfortunately, right now, we do not have any tertiary treatment products approved in the state of Wisconsin. I believe there is one that either has been recently submitted or will shortly be submitted, a UV light for product approval. So right now, those would only get the footprint or the second column loading rate. So they would still get the smaller, footprint, but they just do not get the vertical separation credit. So anyway, right now, follow the product approvals, read them, understand what that product can and can't do. And any changes based on manufacturers' responses will be communicated, to the industry once we know. So after March 29th, when we get that information, or earlier, once we get information from the manufacturers, then we'll decide what we need to do as an agency. And we'll talk with them and discuss it. And then if there is any changes, we'll let you guys know as soon as we know. But anyway, that's what's going on with those kind of products. Want to mention a little bit about some float selections. This has been an issue that's been cropping up as we're doing plan reviews through the winter here. We've been taking a little bit more time looking at some of these things. And so the float selection is make sure that you read the manufacturer's product descriptions for the floats that you're going to be using. The floats should list a pumping or a working range, and we've started to see quite a few floats that are being spec'd out on the plans that can't meet the dose or the float range that's selected. So for instance here, if you look at these pumps, the SJEs, you can see that they have different ones. Most of them are like 7 to 36 inches of a float range. So if you have floats that are below that, if you have a below a or have difference outside of that 7 to 36 inch range for setting, they won't work. So here we have like a double float master. There we can get down to 3 inches. But you have to make sure that we're using a float that is suitable for the selection that you have. So when you're in your making your calculations and you have a 2-inch dose or a 1.5-inch dose, you're going to have a problem finding a float that's going to be able to meet your selection. So here's another one. Here's one. It's the Alder. I'm sorry, it's cut off at the top a little bit, but this is the Alderon Oh, you can see it. Sorry, it's just cut off on my page. Never mind. Alderon Industries here. This one does have a 2-inch to 60-inch pumping range. So this one you can get down to a smaller. So if you're below 3, you're probably gonna be looking at a product like this to get down to a 2-inch rating. So just make sure that you're aware. This all goes into part of your design when you're selecting, your dosage ranges based on the size of the pipe and how much you have to dose and how much you need for your setting to get your less than a 20%. But also filling the 5 times void volume. Make sure that you have pump or floats that can meet your pump settings. So just something to be aware of. Wanted to mention we had a question here, a topic that had come up. What's the difference between a floor drain and a catch basin? We do have these listed in our appendix 383. If for sizing, commercial, if floor drains are 25 gallons, catch basins are 65 gallon, and that's estimated design. But what's the difference between a floor drain and a catch basin? Well, it's mostly the size, but it's the function also. So a floor drain is basically just an inlet to the building drain. Is just an inlet. That's what it is. So a couple different ones. You can either just have the round one, which is just an inlet to the drain, or sometimes you'll see like these sort of like the grate kind of drains. But either way, there's really no storage capacity inside of them. It's just an inlet to the drain itself. So that's what a floor drain is. A catch basin is actually sort of like a buried sump. It does have some volume in it, or like a mini tank, I guess is the way you would have. But catch basins are a receptacle which collect the debris, such as sand and grit and possibly oils and grease. So the important thing to be aware of is not only do we have a sizing requirement in there, but especially, well, even with floor drains too. I mean, if you are in a facility that has a floor drain, you need to ask questions, what are the floor drains for? And especially catch basins, asking, well, what are they for? What's going on? There is also a possible hazardous or industrial component with that. I was looking at a plan many years ago, and it had a very, very large building. I mean, several tens of thousands of square feet. It had 27 floor drains. Well, what the floor drains were is it was all part of the Caterpillar, repair shop. They were repairing large industrial equipment. So the floor drains were catching things such as oil, grease, fuel, possibly. So it was a hazardous industrial kind of issue. But you might have a floor drain just in the bathroom. That's just because if the toilet overfills or something like that, they, don't want to make a mess. It's just a floor drain. So the important thing on them is that, there is a difference. Floor drain is just an inlet. Catch basin is going to be trapping stuff. And then it's usually associated with things that may cause us issues. Like a car wash or something is going to have a catch basin to trap grit and things like that from that facility. So catch basins have receptacle. Floor drains do not. And for both of them, you still need to look at, what are they trying to collect? And there may be possibly some hazardous or industrial things going in there, which is sort of another monkey wrench. Speaking of industrial wastewater, I want to pop a few slides in here. DNR has sole authority for industrial wastewater through the WPDS permits, which is Wisconsin Pollution Discharge Elimination System, which is basically they're delegated from the EPA's pollutant discharge elimination system permits. So anyway, it's a nationwide thing. The DNR has authority for these, but industrial wastewater are things like food manufacturing. So bakery, meat, dairy plants, things like that. They're actually manufacturing food. Candy production would be another one. Beer and wine production are ones that catch in there. If they're producing things and they have waste, from the manufacturing process, cleaning out bottles for bottling, things like that. That is an industrial wastewater. Petroleum, sort of tied in here is what we just looked at: vehicle repair, maintenance, or washing that we might have there. Or I even had one that was actually they were doing ethanol plant. So those are industrial wastewaters. Animal waste is another one. Laundry is actually listed. Those are industrial wastewater, and those are handled through WPDS permits, whether it goes into a tank or whether they would store it and land apply it, or whether they have their own treatment system. That's up to the DNR's purview on what they're going to do with those kind of systems. If we do have a commingled wastewater, such as domestic and industrial, so for instance, you have your little farm to table, restaurant out at the farm, you're serving some food and you're brewing a little bit of wine, possibly we could, mix those together. But the DNR has to give concurrence on that because there's an industrial component and a domestic component. So the DNR has to give concurrence on a commingled wastewater. We would issue a sanitary permit. It might be soil-based depending on what they're generating, if it's just wash waters or something possibly, or if it's, difficult waste. A lot of these are going to be extremely high strength waste and hard for us to treat in the soil-based septic system. It may just go to a holding tank. So if they're commingled, DNR has to give concurrence. If it's just an industrial wastewater, DNR handles it. That's out of our hands in the POWTS. So one that we run into quite a bit is example of dog kennels. We don't have recommendations on sizing right now for the kennel portion. Employees in domestic wastewater, we have the appendix in 383. You can use water meter readings or other published data to help come up with some numbers. But again, because animal waste is an industrial wastewater, the DNR must give concurrence on that. So if it's only dog kennel, from the kennel runs or whatever, that's all industrial. If they're mixing domestic wastewater, bathrooms for whatever, the employees there, then it would be a commingled, but DNR still has to give their approval. Sanitary permit would be issued once we have DNR. But again, if DNR, if it's only industrial wastewater, there'd be no sanitary permit. It's segregated wastewater. Only the DNR would have authority over that. So just an example at how that would work. So the commercial wastewaters, I also wanted to mention, since we tied into that, table 383.43 appendix, lists, what we see for, what we call commercial wastewaters. So these would be ones still regulated through POWTS. They're not industrial, but it lists quite a few things in here. So it lists most, not all. This is just a part of the first page of the table. So there are some things that don't show up on here, and we'll just sort of have to deal with them. Again, this is appendix. This is guide. So basically we use these numbers unless we have a good reason not to. You may have some monitoring data, or sampling data, well data, something like that may give us a better number. We are in the process of revising this. We're adding a few things that are not on there, changing some things around. So we are in the process of doing revision to this table here, and modifying it a bit. One of the other things I know that has been brought up recently is that short-term rentals, so the VRBOs or the Airbnbs, are not commercial facilities. This has been something that's been out there. These are not considered commercial. These are still a residential. So even though they may be licensed or something by either the county or by DADCAP, the buildings themselves are still a residence, and that's the way they're considered according to our code. Also, again, don't confuse commercial with industrial. So, make sure, there are some things like the one on here, I don't have it highlighted, but the fifth one down, beauty salon. I mean, there is a potential for industrial wastewater there, hazardous wastewater, if they're doing a lot of perms and things like that, that may be, getting into it. So, be aware, that there is commercial wastewater, there's industrial wastewater. The two are not the same. So just wanted to point those out to you. Next one, just wanted to bring this up. We're still working on, let's move it ahead here. We're still working on the DNR DSPS MOU. I don't know why it's going ahead here, but so that's a memorandum of understanding. It's a working document between the agencies. Wow, we're just going automatic here. So it's, for some reason, I don't want to stay, but I'll just leave it. Anyway, the DNR MOU that we're working on, it's a relationship between the two agencies at how we cooperate for large scale systems. So that's the greater than 12,000 gallon per day systems. So I just want to point out that that's still an ongoing process. The MOU is not something that can be used to create a new code or new rules. It's basically just a policy at how the DNR and DSPS communicate with each other when we do have systems larger than 12,000 gallons per day. I know we've mentioned this several times here over the last, well, probably year or two. The DNR has changed some of the way they interpret some things for their rules. But again, this MOU is just how do we, hand off to the DNR to get their concurrence on the large scale systems. So once this gets finalized, I believe we've gone through several meetings with the DNR, talked back and forth. It's sort of gone through some of the legal stuff. I believe now it's going up through the upper tiers of management. Hopefully we'll have a resolution on this soon and be able to share it and get it out to you. But just want you to be aware, we're still working on that, and that has not been resolved yet. The next thing that we're working on is the POWTS TAC, the Technical Advisory Committee. They convened last Friday on February 9th. So it's been several years, I think probably about 4 or 5 years since the TAC last convened. So it's a formal process. People have to be appointed. They have to vote on different things. They have to have a quorum, a number of people there in order to hold it. It's an official process. It's not just a get together chit chat. It's an official process. But anyway, they convened on February 9th. Just wanted to share, with you what sort of went on a little bit is they did review a new product and a new component manual. We're reviewing those concurrently. So as the product comes out, we'll have a component manual with that. We also reviewed the hydrograph procedure. There were some questions and concerns about that. And just let you know that the TAC, it's right in the title, Technical Advisory Committee. They're advisory and they give the department information or technical input. So it's comprised of, like academia and a manufacturer rep and a county rep, and it's a designer rep. So it's a bunch of different people from all sort of walks of life in the POWTS program, but they give us technical advice. And so again, it's just an advisory committee. We don't have to take their recommendations, but we do, weight them fairly highly. We don't want to be out of step with the industry. So just wanted to let you know that the TAC did convene and gave us some information. And then again, we'll take that into consideration for future policy or product developments. Wanted to mention e-audit results. Have a little bit of information here on some of the audits that are ongoing. So e-audit results, we had 69 counties report. We still have 2 holdouts for counties. One is having some issues with turnover, that the new people are having some problems trying to figure out what exactly needs to be done. They haven't done it in the past, so we're working with them. The other county we're hoping will shortly turn in the information yet. But we have, anyway, 2 counties that have not submitted the current data for 2023. So I do, as the numbers I'm going to share with you, I've used last year's data to sort of estimate, what they're doing this year. So it's not quite accurate, but gives us something to go off of. Also, Milwaukee County has 8 municipalities. Those are not included in here. Milwaukee County does not have agent or is not the local governmental unit in charge of POWTS. Milwaukee County, it would fall to each individual town or village or city. So because Milwaukee County, some jurisdictions have systems, others are totally on sewer and do not. But there are 8 municipalities, and they range from, I think, town of Franklin has the most. I think they have somewhere around about 500 systems, where you have some that have very little, such as the city of Milwaukee itself has 1 holding tank. So it's most of them are very small, 1 to 10 systems. But anyway, we'll gather data from those later this year. They're very small component. They don't do stuff frequently, so we'll deal with them a little bit later this year. But this just shows back to 2008. We started doing the inventory of the systems. You'll notice there's some wacky stuff in 2011 in the beginning there. Those data was incomplete. We were just starting our POWTS inventory. So some, I believe in 2010, some counties were estimating quite a few systems, and then after they finally did their inventory, found out they didn't have as many as they thought. We didn't have all the counties in the state reporting completely, so those numbers are a little wonky. But you can see from about 2013 onward, a nice slowly, gradual, increase in number of systems that are in the inventory. So as it stands as of last year, 2023, we're at 787, 286 systems inventoried statewide. We're going to have a few more than that when we add in the Milwaukee County ones, I'm sure, and get some updates. But again, these are preliminary. These are just the e-audits. And for those of you that aren't familiar, we send out an electronic audit, which is basically sort of a self-reporting form to the counties to give us the information, and then we will go out and actually audit those. Throughout the year, we'll pull a certain number of counties that will physically audit in the office. But those of you that are probably aware, we are down a little bit. We're down about 6.5% statewide on state sanitary permits from 2022 to 2023. We had 11,670 net permits issued. So when we issue state sanitary permits, they will issue one for whatever a system, and then if you get it revised, they will issue a new sanitary permit number. But we don't count that as a net one, because really it's just a change of a number. There's really not a new permit. It's just we changed the number. So these are just the number of net permits issued, and we're down about 6.5% statewide is what it looks. And then the other one I wanted to share with you, some of the data that's of interest to everybody is that the new versus replacement. I mean, that's always sort of an interesting one to see sort of how the breakdown is. When times are pretty lean, the new component is very small. When business is booming and a lot of houses being built, obviously you're going to have a much larger new component, but still pretty close to 50-50 split, just slightly more for the replacement systems. We're at about 53 to 47% for replacement versus new. So the POWTS program audits, the field staff right now are currently conducting office audits for the counties. So the 5 district field staff are going to counties. We try to do an in-person audit every other year with the counties. So what we do as part of that review is we go in and we check out their what they submitted to us for the e-audit, which is sort of a data gathering. We do that for all counties throughout the state, even if we don't do an office audit. But we go through that, make sure that the information they reported is accurate. We look at sanitary permits themselves, see how they were issued. We check their permit logs and the fees. We reconcile them with what they said they issued and any fees that they should have collected, make sure revisions and transfers and things like that are done correctly. And then we also look at plans approved by the agent. We'll actually pull plans that you may not know that you were audited as a plumber or a designer, but we pull a certain number of plans for each county of ones that they did as an agent, whether it's conventionals or if they have agent status for like mounds, we'll pull those. And we'll take a look at plans that they've done review on to make sure that they're doing their things correctly and they're not missing things. And then we also look at the maintenance program, see how that works, make sure they're doing what they need to as part of their maintenance. And then the second part that we have is that we will do field audits. Those will usually follow in the summer. Those won't necessarily be the same ones. We used to grab the permit files and then go out in the field and look at it. Really not useful because the things are already in the ground. Field audits will most likely be doing an audit of an installation. So some of you have run into us while we're doing those out in the field, performing those field audits. But just want you to be aware of some of the information surrounding the audit process. So that brings us sort of to the end here, finish up a little early. So if you have any kind of questions for us, we'll be able to answer those. Otherwise, we are at the end.
Thank you, Matt.